Welcome, everybody. I'm Chris Dendes. I'm the Executive Director of Results Canada, and we're thrilled to have you on this special webinar, which is about, um, uh, first of all, interviewing an incredibly special guest, which I'll get to in a second, but also then digging into a webinar because you know at Results we're about education and action. So we'll start with some education and some discussion and then move to action. Which will be led by one of our amazing staff, Neha, and then we'll dig into the AGM. And so we'll hope to have this wrapped up by about 8:15. But again, thank you all for joining and for being on the call from across the country. So just to begin, and Melissa will help me if I forget any of the housekeeping rules, but our discussion tonight is going to be in English, and questions in French are always welcomed, and we have somebody who can translate. The webinar, as I said, will be about 45 minutes after we speak to Libby. And there will be time after a discussion with Libby to have some questions, and I'll introduce her in a second. The recording of the webinar will be shared next week, so watch for your inboxes. We'll have this very first portion of the discussion and then the webinar recorded. And just please make sure that, as I said, that you're all muted to kind of ensure that we have the best experience for everybody, but make sure that you unmute when it's time for questions. And you can use the chat box for those of you who know Zoom, which is the little orange icon at the bottom, to raise questions at any point. And Melissa, I think, or you can raise your hand. You can raise your hand in the chat box or raise your hand visually if you're on camera, and Melissa will help me. She's nodding. So Melissa will help me keep track of those. So with that, let's just dig in. So everybody, it's first of all just a tremendous honor for me to introduce, you know, a longtime friend and colleague, Libby Davies. Libby has been a social activist for 40 years. It began as a community organizer in Vancouver's downtown east side. In 1972. She was a mere toddler at the time, right, Libby? You're barely walking, barely out of diapers. She served as Vancouver City Councillor for 5 terms, and then as a Member of Parliament for Vancouver East for 6 terms from 1997 to 2015, eventually serving as the NDP House Leader and Deputy Leader. She's been an outspoken advocate for human rights, housing, peace, social justice throughout her political life. In her first book, Outside In, was recently published in May 2019. I've picked it up. I'm halfway through it. I can't put it down. It's so brilliant and well written. You're going to love it. So I encourage everybody to kind of pick it up. And I should add that Libby and I have a personal relationship, and that I was fortunate enough to be, I think, your first ledge assistant over a period, or very early in your tenure on Parliament Hill. We had a lot of fun together. She hired me when I was 8 months pregnant. I worked for 15 days and then went on maternity leave for like 5 or 6 months at the time. And the person who came in second did my mat leave. So even back in 1997, Libby was an icon in terms of social justice. So with that, let's dig in. So Libby, you've recently written a book, Outside In. It speaks to your experience as an advocate working for social progress, both as an activist pushing from outside the system and also one working for change. And you know, at Results, and I think you know Results well through our conversations, but we live by that philosophy, working hard to push for change from outside, but also taking the time to meet with parliamentarians, know our issues, and come in with defiance asks. And I'd love to just pick your brain a little bit on the importance of citizen advocacy, you know, especially now. So feel free to have some introductory comments, but maybe I'll dig in with the first question so we can keep things rolling. So with this election, it's going to be an interesting one given the current political climate, and it seems like it's shaping up to be a tight race. So maybe in your reflections, my question is, does advocacy during an election resonate, and why does it matter? And over to you, Lib.
Okay, well, first of all, hello everybody. I'm just delighted to be joining your call tonight, and it's true, Chris and I go way back, and she was a fantastic ledge assistant on Parliament Hill, and I was so happy when you ended up at Results Canada, which is a wonderful organization. Although I have to say I never had the privilege of going on one of your trips. It was always never quite worked out, but I know many of my colleagues did, and it's a small but mighty organization. So I'm very happy to participate in this and try and provide you with whatever information I can. Yes, a federal election is coming up. I'll tell you folks, it is going to zip by so fast that it will be like a blink of an eye. I mean, here we are in the middle of June. The election is October the 21st, I think it is. The writ will actually be dropped, about 6 weeks prior to that. So first of all, advocacy is very important all the time, but certainly during a federal election, the opportunity is very heightened in terms of political engagement. And it doesn't have to be partisan, it can be non-partisan. And so the idea of advocacy and like moving on your issue and getting in there and finding political engagement, I think is really important. The only caution I would have is that it's almost too late. What happens is that political parties set themselves on a very tight course, right? What's the big day? It's election day, E-Day, everything backs up from that. So already the political parties have developed their platforms probably. Some of them might still be in the works, but we're beginning to see some of that now come out in the media. We just heard about the Conservatives and their so-called climate change plan. We saw the NDP bring out its plan, overall its platform, which was a fairly major thing. And so we have really a very short window from June until the writ is dropped, and then into the election itself, of course. But in this kind of run up, a very short window to engage at a local level and hopefully even a national level around the issues that you care about. And so it will take a lot of thought and strategy in terms of how you actually might be able to do that. And what I would say, Chris, is that it does matter, because this is the time when candidates and the political parties that they're running for, they want to, they want to put out their message, right? They want us to know what they stand for, and that may be incredibly vague and not very helpful to us, or it may be very specific. And so we've got to try and kind of turn the table here and say, we want you that as candidates and parties, you have to hear what we have to say. And I would say the starting point for that, Chris, is that to do some research on the platforms when they come out, and to figure out, and maybe this is getting to your last question a little bit more early, but is to, you've got to find that hook, right? Based on whatever the parties are saying, what is the hook that you can use to then get involved in some kind of discussion? And I would say you have to strategize and figure out how can you and your members engage with some of the candidates at a local level on some of the questions that you want to raise. And my advice would be, the earlier you do it, the better, because if you leave it till September, when the writ is actually dropped and the election is officially underway, it will be too late, because things will be so highly scripted by then that it will be very difficult to find the space and the time even to have a discussion, to have an engagement, to have a back and forth, a dialogue with candidates or the parties overall. So timing here is really of the essence in terms of where we are at right now.
I totally appreciate that. I mean, I think the strength of many of the volunteers who are on this call, but results in general, is the sensibility that, the relationship building that happens with parliamentarians doesn't just, it happens at election periods because that's a critical time. It happens before, and obviously it happens afterwards. And part of, I think, the campaigning time is to sort of get in early and build relationships that we can make resonate post E-Day, no matter what happens.
Exactly.
And so actually, Libby, just bouncing to something else I wanted to chat with you, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to this, but I think there's a personal one. What resonates with you? What's resonated with you over the years when you're speaking to, constituents, or even during election campaigns, but when you're speaking with people, what's the kind of tone, what's the kind of messaging that really matters to you? Define what makes people a good advocate in terms of their interactions with you?
I can absolutely say, Chris, that I think it's the relationship, and I'm talking about a personal relationship that you develop with the candidates or the incumbent member of parliament that you're trying to engage with. Um, I know during various election campaigns, you know, we would get a ton of surveys and questionnaires, and
Hmm.
people would drop into the campaign office. You'd never seen them before. You'd never, you know, maybe you knew about the organization, maybe you didn't. And I always felt like I was a commodity. You know what I mean? As people
Yeah.
saw me as this candidate running an election, I don't think they really cared to know much about who I was or what I did. And so it was a very superficial, on some occasions, a very superficial kind of interaction. And what I appreciated is when I felt like I could develop a relationship with the person, the group, or the organization that was trying to raise issues with me, and that I could begin to understand what they were raising and why, how that connected to what I was doing. Maybe there was some commonality in some of the work that I'd been doing. And as you say, the relationship goes on after the election, but it was that sense that it was actually people talking to people rather than me just being this sort of stereotype, you know, of
Yeah.
the candidate. You know, you really don't know who they are, and you just want to get through your questionnaire. You just want to get through your and
Yeah.
and and you and the person or the group, they only want to hear the answers they want to hear. It isn't actually a dialogue. It isn't really a back and forth. And so I think the more
Mm.
you can focus on selecting, because obviously you can't contact 338 candidates from 4 different parties at least. I mean, you're talking about 1,000 people. But I think what you can do is strategically think of various candidates related to the different parties in various locations where you feel you have a base, where you have a network of people, and you can organize those folks to right now start reaching out. You have to figure out who the candidates are. I mean, not all the nominations are done, but many of them are, and they will be in the next month or so. And so it's not too early to start trying to reach out and saying, we'd like to sit down with you, we'd like to discuss, you know, issue X, Y, or Z, and trying to understand where that person is coming from, the person you're speaking with, the candidate. What do they know? What don't they know? What is it that, what is the information that you need to provide? And the key is to really get your foot in the door. You don't want just a one-shot thing, right? Your goal is to get your foot in the door and to start building a dialogue and a relationship with that candidate or the party, to find out, you know, how your issue is resonating. What is it that you can assist with? What information can you provide? And what is it that you're learning from them, right? What do they see as some of the barriers to your issue in terms of the campaign or even after the election in the House of Commons?
I mean, I love that. And I think one of the things that I love about this organization, as I keep coming back to it, as you know, is in part having been on the other side of the table with you and learning so much from you, but also that sense of, it's good to be idealistic and, results believes in a world free of poverty, but we advocate around the steps and we go in educated and we go in with a specific ask, not that something that's so untangible, unrealistic, like end global poverty. That's our goal. But invest in the global fund, and this is why it makes sense for your party to do it, or it makes sense for you to kind of do it. So I really appreciate that advice.
Well,
Yep.
what I would say is that you have to do some of this initial research, because you want to go in and you want to know the party that you're approaching, the candidate that you're approaching. Does that party even have any commitment, any stated commitment, either in terms of the work that they've already done in Parliament,
Yeah.
like through motions or committee work or whatever it might be, or is there something in their platform? Like, you need to know that. So you need to gather your intelligence when you go into the meeting, because if there is nothing, if it's basically a blank slate, then of course the
Yeah.
first question is, why, why is this a non-issue for you? Why is it that something that you know virtually nothing about, and how can we help build on that? So you actually do need to do some of this advanced intelligence gathering, so that when you do have that engagement, you have a base from which you're operating in terms of, you know, what it is specifically you're putting forward.
Uh-oh. Am I the only one that's frozen?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you, Chris, but your image is frozen, so
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back. Yeah.
Sorry. Libby, thank you for that. I'm actually giving everybody like the 1-minute warning that I'm coming to you if you have any questions for Libby. But I guess, Libby, just building off that, because one of the, you know, actually we're pleased to see in the NDB platform actually a party that you have a connection to, and we're a nonpartisan organization, but that the platform did include some very robust language around international development, around the global, around areas that we had been pushing for, and we were very happy that that came to fruition. But you know, international development can be a tough issue when there's tough issues at home. And I know you've been a champion of the international sort of aid space, but boy, we're under crunch. And so I guess before I go to the crew for other questions, and Melissa will keep track in the chat box and elsewhere. But any advice on how we stay strong on a message that, you know, might not always resonate with all political parties, particularly around the global piece, how we kind of bring it home and make it relevant?
Well, I think at this stage of the game, you need to do two things. One is it does need to be on a personal level. So I think your goal should be, what can you get candidate X or Y to commit to, right? It may be difficult to get through to parties overall. Maybe Results Canada has an overall survey or questionnaire they're going to put out, which is great, that's fine. But I think what you need to do is figure out some key candidates that you think are going to win, okay? Like, I mean, somebody's going to have to make some decisions about this, because there's no point spending to be horribly crass about it, there's no point spending a whole bunch of time and energy on candidates that don't have a hope in hell of winning. You got to figure out a key, like, how many candidates do you think you can get through to across Canada? Is it 30? Is it 20? Or whatever, you know, try and figure that out, and then try and figure out who they are across the political spectrum. Don't ignore the Conservatives, and then make your appeal very personal to that individual candidate, knowing ahead of time what it is the party is or isn't saying, but then bring it right down to the personal level about what are you going to do as a candidate if you are elected on this issue? What will you do within your caucus? What will you do within Parliament? Will you move motions? Will you write a letter? Will you raise it in your caucus? Will you help form a committee? You know, we had the HIV/AIDS committee in Ottawa, right, which was an all-party committee. There's friendship groups and so on. So I think that would be the two things. One, make it personal, and two, zero in on trying to secure commitments from people about what they are actually willing to do if they are elected, and what are they willing to do during the campaign, but also what are they willing to do if they're elected. Then you've got to keep track of that, so you can have a debriefing and you can start putting that intelligence together and seeing, you know, well, of the 30 people that you got through to, you know, 20 of them got elected. Well, then you've got a bit of a base from which to start with the new parliament.
Yeah, we're gonna hit the ground running on E-Day plus 2.
And your point about doing it in steps, there's no point going in with huge global demands. Like, try and break it down into manageable steps. And the key is to do it in a way that it's really hard for someone to refuse. Because what you're asking them to do is so eminently reasonable and doable, because remember, your goal is to get your foot in the door. Your goal is to establish the relationship. So, you know, you can ask for, you know, pie in the sky, and they'll say blah 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 blah, you know, oh, I'll see, right? So you have to bring it down, make it something manageable that the person would have a hard time saying no to. Then you got your foot in the door, and then you follow it up from there.
That's great. Libby, we do have one question. So the question that I see in the chat box is, how does Libby describe her political legacy? She's going to say you're going to have to buy the book.
You know what? I don't even know how to answer that question. I'm sorry. I think that's, other people will decide that. The only thing I could say is that what has fascinated me in politics for 40 plus years is this connection between what I would call social movement politics and the more formal world of politics, and the interaction between the two. Exactly what we're talking about tonight. That's always fascinated me, and how to bridge that gap, how to make people more politically literate, how to make people feel more comfortable about engaging in the political process. And so if I've helped in that journey, and as a result help bring about change on some particularly tough issues, then I feel, maybe I did something useful. But I'm not really big into legacies, I guess. It's an ongoing thing, right?
It's an ongoing thing.
Life ongoing.
Are there any questions in terms of hands up or people that want to vocalize a question?
And we have another one as well in the chat box.
Okay. I'm going to, so the question is, how much does a party manifesto weigh against international issues to a candidate? I guess they're trying to get at, Kamal, I'm not sure if you're happy to unmute and intercede, but I think it's about how much are people constrained by what a party platform sort of articulates that they.
Very good question.
Yeah.
This is an excellent question. Party platforms during an election tend to want to appeal to the broadest sector that they can, because that's where the pool of votes is, right? Everybody's got their base, but every party is fighting for that sort of 5-10% that's going to put them over the top. So it may well be, and I think this is a very good question, because discerning where the party is at versus where the person is at, and maybe the person, the candidate you're speaking with, is much more advanced or much more committed or a much stronger advocate for the issue, say for the level of foreign aid from Canada, than the party is, then that's gold. That information is gold, because then you can begin to develop a champion if they get elected on the inside, and that would be a go-to person as you begin to work further on so setting up a discussion, questions that helps bring out that information, the party versus the candidate, would be very, very good information for you to have.
I have one last question, and then I'm gonna have to thank you. But so this is from Pat, and they're wanting to know, what do you think about making a stronger connection between the climate change issues and the need for increased funding for international development?
Absolutely.
Everything should come back to
you. The whole question of the North being, quote, advanced, but having in effect destroying the planet. The whole question of growing inequity, growing gap between wealth and poverty, and development, lack of development, or what kind of development. I think connecting those dots is enormous. I think it takes a lot of skill, particularly in relation to my earlier comments, which is trying to bring it down to a level that is manageable. But I think, I always think, you think your analysis should be global. Your analysis has to be global in terms of your own understanding, but your execution, particularly during an election campaign, can be very strategic and focused. But nevertheless, it's a very good idea to kind of connect it for people globally, for the candidates, and to make it clear that what Canada does on the international stage, what we do in the international community on development and aid and reducing poverty, is very much connected to what kind of role we play as well as leaders on climate change. So I think to bring those issues together is perfectly good, and I think it's a good strategy.
Libby, I can't thank you enough for doing this, for speaking to our crew, our family, and being a part of it. Somebody I've admired and respected for many, 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 many years, too many years, too old, but thank you. And thanks everybody for your questions. They were excellent. Again, I'll just put another plug out for this beautifully written book about Outside In, which really talks about the connection between what happens in Parliament Hill, but also importantly, what happens outside of it for people that are affecting change on the front lawns or anywhere inside and outside Parliament Hill. So thank you, Libby, and thank you to everybody for your excellent questions, and looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chris, and everyone at Results Canada, and I wish you all the best in your AGM tonight, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say as we get into the federal election. So take care, everybody, and thank you for inviting me.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Libby.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, everybody. I think now, cheers to all of you and all of the questions and for that engaged discussion. And now I'm going to turn it over to Neha, who is going to lead people through a webinar on election activism.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Melissa, just give me a thumbs up so I know.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for being here. I know that there's a lot of you on this call, so I really appreciate your time and effort. As much as effort we've tried to put into this toolkit for you guys, so I really hope you guys are looking forward to seeing what we've come up with, and we really tried to keep you in mind in terms of the ongoing conversations we've had over the past year, in terms of information you guys felt was useful. This was building off of previous pieces of work we've also done. So this is just a nice little way for us to kind of get engaged in the upcoming election, which most people really look forward to Christmas or their birthdays. And for me, is all about the election. So I'm really excited to share this with all of you. So if you go on our main website, you see there's actually two ways you can get to our toolkit. One is with this kind of rotating photo that's been happening. Eventually it comes up with our toolkit. And then also at the bottom, we have a blog here that also will let you get to the toolkit. So those will be there pretty much until election day. So if you guys ever want to access it, or you can of course bookmark it, but you can just click here where it says Act Now. So we'll go ahead and do that. So here's our election toolkit. So we start off on the first home page. So this is the landing page that you'll be on. And if you scroll down, we have a little bit of an introductory for you guys to know what kind is in the toolkit. Of course, we have welcoming words from our Executive Director, Chris Dendies, who you just heard from. And right at the bottom, if we keep going down, there's actually a countdown that is on each and every page, so you guys are fully aware of when the polls close. So it kind of gives you guys an idea of how long you can keep talking to your candidates about things. And as we get closer and closer to the day, and obviously the big election day, it will be really exciting to kind of see the numbers go down. And at the corner here, I just want to make mention of the fact that we put in a little disclaimer here just to talk about the fact that Results Canada is a nonpartisan organization. So of course we don't necessarily, endorse any election candidates or parties, but we certainly work with all parties in terms of getting our advocacy work done. But I just did want to let you know that we're not necessarily promoting anyone. We're just looking to advocate for the issues that matter most to us, which are conveniently here in this little image in the corner that have the little hands with all the stuff that Results Canada works on. So if we can scroll back up, we have continue to step 1 of the election toolkit. So if we click on 1, it'll bring us to Election 101. So we're getting informed. So this page really is for you guys to understand a little about the election, why it's important, why you should be participating in it. And of course, you guys are more than welcome to read this on your own time, just mindful of everyone's time here. So how to get elected and things you want to keep in mind. And of course, asking your friends and family to join with you. So it's always really important. For those of you who've been involved with the results for a long time, you might be familiar with the calls to action, which we often do monthly. So we actually provided a little click here for you to get to the call to action each month. So if we click on that, it'll populate to this month's action. For June. July will be out shortly after Canada Day. And it just provides you with all the actions we do on the side. Of course, you can download the sheet if you'd like to print it out or meet with your group. Some of you do that. So it's just, again, a little web page for you guys to access all these actions that we do. So for the whole month of, I think it's July to October, we will be focusing our actions, of course, around the election and what's going on. This is also a great tool for you to know kind of what's coming up with the elections, how things are moving forward. We might have some insider intel for you that we've been hearing back from you guys, as well as things that we've been hearing in Ottawa. It's a great space for us to kind of communicate with each other and be able to share resources. So that's just really important for you guys to know. So if we can just go back. Perfect. So then we can go to step 2 of the election toolkit. So this page is all about Canadian aid. So that's essentially what we will be talking to the candidates about and its impact. So here's a little bit of information for those of you who may not be too familiar with what Canadian aid is. Gives a description of what it is and why it's important and why we thought that this would be the main campaign we want to focus on during this election period. Here's a video for you, of course, if you guys prefer to have something like that, feel free to share this on your social media as well. I personally found that the videos were very impactful, and a lot of people, it's an easy to understand way of explaining what we're doing and also getting more people involved, which I know a lot of you have been working really hard on building our groups and making sure that people are aware of the issues that we work on. So that's the way. So we have some kind of key different ways of how we can educate on Canadian aid. This is good for yourself or as a refresher or simply just to learn more. I know I've learned a lot just from reading this, but we have 10 things we know about Canadian aid. So these are just generally 10 great points that I think are easily usable in any of your candidate meetings, or potentially if you're talking with people even in your community about why this issue is important. And we also have a downloadable PDF for you. So if some of you like to print things off, it's all available for you there as well, depending on how you like it. So we tried to make sure it was easy for you to use. So we got the 10 things you need to know. We have political party history on Canadian aid. So this was a question I got a lot of from our grassroots members, which was, you know, if I'm meeting with different candidates, like how do I know what to talk to them about? Or so we kind of did a little bit of a debrief for you for each of the main political parties. So the 3 top main parties based off of what the rankings are right now in terms of numbers. And so we just gave a little bit of a backgrounder in terms of where each party is at, what they've historically done, what they focused on. And again, it's just for you to kind of brush up to maybe target some of your conversations in your meetings with your candidates. So really useful. And of course, if you're meeting with other parties, feel free to give me a shout or email us. We can certainly find out more information if you're meeting with, let's say, the Green Party. But it's also downloadable for you. So that's a little bit more of the political side of it. But I think it's really helpful to have that historical knowledge behind you when you're speaking with your party candidates. And then we have here the positive impact of Canadian aid. So what we really did was we took the main issues that we focus a lot on at Results Canada, and we kind of broke it down for you to be able to show how Canadian aid impacts some of these issues that we focus on. So for example, we talked about how Canadian aid provides tuberculosis treatment. So for those of you who've been working really hard in the Global Fund campaign that we've currently working on and will continue to in the coming weeks, I think this might be a really interesting portion for you to read up on. And if you feel more comfortable with that material, that certainly can make a good angle for you to move forward on your meeting. We also talked about Canadian aid, how it provides nutritious meals, so how nutrition now fits into Canadian aid. And again, for those of you who've been working on those issues with us over the past little while, this might be an area of interest for you. And then we go down a little bit more. We talk about proper vaccinations and how Canadian aid is helping reach millions with that. So it's some really good material, again, really kind of have that information there for you readily available. And of course, feel free to use this in your meetings or provide this information because I think it's really important. Not only do we just talk about the issues that we normally look at, we really wanted to consider kind of what are these hot button issues in this current election climate. So I know a lot of you, this kind of came up in the call with Libby, but I think there are some really good angles we can take depending on your candidate and necessarily what they want to focus on, but also what angles you think might make sense. So we talked about how aid can actually build a strong economy and those kind of key line messages. We really tried to simplify it and make it as short as possible so it's easy for you to understand or memorize. We talk about how aid can also support women. So there's some really good angles there as well. If you're meeting with, let's say, a candidate that's really about gender equality, that this might be some good points for you to use. Of course, we talked about the very popular hot button issue for this election, which is climate change. So I'm really happy to hear you guys are thinking along the same lines as us in terms of how we can try to make that link for you. And then we have that we're bigger than our borders. So of course, not just thinking about it from that, making that local to global lens, and it's not just people somewhere else. This is part of a whole global community. We talk about migration and Canada's diversity as also being an angle that we could take, and potentially, depending on which party you're speaking to, could be of interest. Education, which has been something that I think a lot of candidates have shown some interest in. So I think, again, that might be of interest for you guys. Of course, all downloadable for you. So those are kind of the hot button issues. But again, if you think that there's something missing or you need more information, or your candidate said that they were really interested in something specific, by all means, let us know, and then we can see if we can get some research done for you in terms of how to kind of give a good response back to your candidate if it wasn't included in there. We do have here our weekly quiz. So this is just kind of something fun and exciting that the team came up with in terms of trying to see how we can engage with different people and perhaps just kind of keep the whole experience of the selection really exciting. So we have a weekly quiz, which we can populate here. So once a week, we will be producing a new quiz for you, which will just give you kind of top line questions that would be really exciting for you to know. And we give you a little bit of tidbits, and it helps you understand kind of some really great questions that will help generate some thoughts around the selection. So you need to be paying attention to what's happening in the news. You probably will need to be watching some candidates debates or some leaders debates, but either way, I think it'll be really exciting and fun. And of course, you can share it with your friends and family and see how they score, and it'll be really exciting for that. So I'm really excited about that. And then we have step 3, which is take action. So become an advocate. So now you kind of understand the election, you know what's happening with aid, and now we're saying, what now? So we want you to meet with your candidates. One of the main things we're going to be asking you to do, of course, there's more than one. It's not just meeting with your MP. There could be a variety of parties that you might want to meet with. But of course, figuring out who your candidate is very important. Elections Canada often gives their final kind of list a little bit later on, so in October, probably when it's too late. So that's not really a list you can necessarily use. If you're unsure about who your candidate is, just try Googling it first. If you're having a hard time, please let me know, and then I will see if I can dig up who they are, because we can always reach out to certain people that may have the answer. But I think just meeting with your candidates, making a list of who they are and who you deem to be important for you to meet with, and of course, making the request. So trying to make this as simple for you as possible, but we did a draft email to request your meeting with your candidate. So if you click it open, it should pop up, which you can just copy and paste into your own email, but feel free to change this. This is just simply to make your life easier in order to how to meet with your candidate and trying to set up that meeting. We also have a suggested meeting outline. So hopefully they confirm a meeting with you or go for coffee or decide to meet with you somewhere. This is just a way to break down your meeting so you don't have to think about it too much, but just an introduction of who you are and what results does, why it's important that you're speaking, and then obviously some main bullets around Canadian aid, which is the main reason why we're all talking about this, and then some questions you may have, and then just a thank you for meeting with them. So just a generic outline, which I thought would be really helpful for you guys to kind of play off of. And then we have a leave behind for Canadian aid. So this is something you can give to your political party candidate, and they can quickly look at what's going on. And it'll explain everything to them in terms of a background. They can talk a little bit about what traditionally has happened within Canada around aid, and then what your candidate can do for you. So it's really just to raise awareness, and hopefully, like as we talked about earlier, is making those connections early on so that when session comes around and everyone's back in Ottawa, these are not complete stranger faces. We know some of them, we've talked with some of them, we've reached out to some of them, and it won't seem so strange. So I think this will be a great way for us to begin those channels early. And just go back. And then this is just a thank you meeting email template. So again, just copy and paste, put it in your email, just saying, hey, thanks for meeting with me, really appreciate it. Of course, here's some more information, or we'd love to hear back about what you said about this or that. So just again, really simple. Hopefully it takes less work for you guys, and you guys can focus more on other parts that we have also filled out. So scroll below. So once you hopefully meet with your candidate and you follow all those steps, you can let us know about it, which is half the challenge. But I think this is really at least from my perspective and my role here at Results is really helpful when I kind of know what's happening on the ground, because then it helps me think about strategies moving forward. And we can talk a lot about what kind of conversations you had with them, where were their interests, did they mention specific things? Like, for example, I met with an MP a couple weeks ago. They were talking about HPV and how this was, you know, really important to them. And I, of course, had great chats with Taryn, who you all know, and who told me that, yes, we've worked on this stuff before and we've done this work. So it really helps kind of bridge those gaps, and we can kind of move things along and move it forward so that we all feel part of this and that we can move our issues along a lot quickly. And we have here quickly for you is to fill out this candidate engagement report, which if we click on, is actually just a quick, easy fill out template. So you've met with your candidate, you simply just fill out this information, and it helps us kind of formulate this information that you have so we can then report back and let you guys know and share it with the broader group so that everyone knows what's happening and that we can all kind of see what's going on. And maybe we're hearing something consistently amongst all the conservative candidates or amongst all the liberal candidates. But it really does help us kind of figure out where their messaging is and how we're going to be moving forward, or circumventing some of our answers to help tackle some of the issues that or challenges they may bring up with us. So that's really important. But yes, please do fill that out. It's there for you to use. And then we also have just some sample questions for local candidates debates. So one of my favorite things to do is going to my local candidates debates. I really look forward to them, and oftentimes they're in my local, well, for me it's Walter Baker Center, but I do enjoy going there and asking questions to your candidates. So some of these questions I've put out here for you, but of course no need to follow this exact questioning, but I just thought if you're ever just there and you wanted to ask this question, it kind of forces the candidates on the spot to either have answers on this or to be able to speak to it and recognize that their constituents are asking about this issue. So this is just another way of engaging with your candidates, but I thought it'd be really great to include that as well. And we have how to vote. That just really leads to Elections Canada, but at least it tells you, you know, where your voting station is, what you need when you vote. So all that basic information, how to register to vote, and all that kind of stuff is there for you just as a tool. And then of course we have using social media, which I know a lot of you are already pros at, and I've been seeing it on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So just a refresher though, this is obviously really important in a way in which candidates are following along in terms of what's happening nationally. So it's important for us to be at the table as well. And we have kind of pre-made tweets for you all to be using throughout the campaign, or whenever you feel inspired to write something. And of course, please feel free to write your own. But of course, the hashtags are really important to mention. So it's hashtag Canada Votes 2019 is the main hashtag that Twitter is using for this year. And of course, we're emphasizing the Canadian Aid hashtag as well. So please do feel free to use this or post it on social. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of videos here. You can always share those as well for everybody. And then we have a social media shareables link right here, which Melissa's gonna click open, which has a bunch of downloadable images, again, for you guys to really use and share should you deem it to be something you wanna do. So just have some great images and photos for you to look at and post. So here's a little bit of an example, but just kind of explains what it is, what Canadian Aid is, and how we can all work together. And this is just, again, to generate buzz, to get people more involved. Hopefully more people will take action for it. So that's really important. And then we have, just scroll down a bit more. Yeah, so we're getting published. So this is, again, another big part, and I would like to say one of the main strengths that Results Canada certainly provides is getting published. And I certainly am in no place to tell you guys how to do that because you guys do it much better than me. But we have a guide here for you for those who may have never done it before but may be interested in doing it for this election. It just kind of gives you a brief understanding of how to get published and different ways you can be published, and how to harness the power in social media. So I certainly encourage those who have not done it yet to please follow that kind of guide, and so it can help you push our messaging forward. And it's certainly, I know as preparing for many candidates in the past, is that we do follow a lot of local papers, so this is the time to get into the local paper business and see if we can get something published in that. So that's really important. And then yes, so we can say proudly show that you care about Canadian Aid. So we're asking people to do that in different ways. One example is that we have a postcard that we're asking people to send. It's called the I Care, which I have conveniently here. So this is the I Care postcard that we'd love to send you guys. If you're having a barbecue or you're inviting your candidate over, by all means, you can certainly have all your friends come sign this, or you can sign it yourself, or have your neighbors come together and sign and send it to the Prime Minister asking them to increase the Canadian aid budget. So I think it's really important for you guys to do this. If you are interested in getting this, or how many you need, or whatever you need, please contact us. There's that link right there, which will populate an email for you to come bother us to give this to you, and we would love to give it. So that's one thing. Another thing that we're doing, which I think is pretty cool, is we actually sent a Canadian flag across Canada. So we brought it actually when we went to Women Deliver, and we're having it shipped around to different grassroots who may be from different parts of the country, and we're asking them to sign with their city on it. So I think that's would be really interesting for those who would be interested in signing that. Please let us know. You can give the same contact us information and just say, hey, I heard about this Canadian flag. I'd love to sign my name on it, you know, Neha from Ottawa. And then we're going to be sending it on election day, hopefully to the new Prime Minister, to show them that this Canadian flag was signed by everyone from across the country and showing their support for aid. So I think that would be great. And then lastly, we're asking Canadians to take a picture of a Canadian flag on their backpack or bag, and to take a picture of it and put it on social media with these hashtags that we've included here. And that's just to kind of, again, generate buzz, kind of have some really great imaging for this. And I think that would be a great way to show them that we are together. It's kind of like that Canadian Abroad link. And I think that that would be something really interesting on social. So I'd love to see a collection of it. Hopefully we can print some in the office as well to inspire us to keep moving forward. So continue to step 4. We have frequently asked questions. So again, this was really based off of questions we've just heard from you guys, also from MPs, and just generally things we've been hearing, and really making sure that we covered as many questions as we could that we've been hearing on the ground, and making sure that you guys feel equipped to be answering these commonly asked questions. So one question is, when is the election? So you click on that, it populates your answer, and so there you go. It's on Monday, October 21st. We have what kinds of activities are funded by Canadian aid. So we have our question and answer right there. So feel free to read that. We have how much does Canada actually spend on aid? We've been hearing that a lot. So the numerics around that, and that's also been cited for you. So there is the source if you ever need it. We have how much should countries spend on aid, and what countries are currently reaching their targets. So again, a lot of times candidates will want to know, okay, well, you're asking me for this, but where are we standing on the global stage? So there's your answer right there, also sourced for you. We have, why should we send money abroad when we have people living in poverty in Canada? A lot of questions we hear about this as well. Of course, these are some really great points. Love to hear your thoughts around this, but I think, you know, it's really important that we feel confidently in this answer, and that you guys feel equipped to be able to answer that question. And it's not an either or, it's just simply, you know, we need to make sure that we're not backsliding on a lot of the progress that we are making, which is great. We have, I am worried we are focusing too much on women and girls when it comes to Canadian aid. What about the boys? I've heard this explicitly from somebody. So I think this was a really great point, and I encourage everyone to ask these types of questions, because it only makes our counter points even better. So that's a really great question, and we've hopefully put some answers in here for you. So we have, how do we know the money we give to these countries is getting to the people who need it? How are fraud and corruption being tackled? So that's a great question as well. We have, how does Canadian aid support migration and refugees? We kind of covered that a little bit earlier, but that's a little bit more explicitly laid out there for you. We have, what roles does Canadian aid play in response to climate change? Again, a little bit more of a shorter version of what I've sent you earlier with the bullets, but it's clear, concise, and can make that link for you. How much does the private sector donate to aid? If Canadians already donate, why does the government need to give as well? So this is often when we hear, sometimes people feel that, does the Canadian government play a role in giving money? Why should we? If people can afford it, why don't they just give the money as donations? Why should, as a government body, have to do that? So this is the answer to that. Does saving children's lives lead to overpopulation? This was new to me. I've been told that this is a question sometimes people do actually get. So I was interested to see the answers, but I think the team did a really good job in trying to answer that. So it's really Interesting. Do Canadians even care about international development? That's another point too. Sometimes people say like, I've knocked on doors for a year and I've never heard anyone bring this up. So I think we have some good facts here, again, well sourced, that explains that yes, people do care about this. We may not be the loudest, but you know, unless you're talking to one of us, but we certainly do care, and we do represent a large number of Canadians. So that's also a good point to have. We have the federal budget is not currently balanced, so we shouldn't spend any more on Canadian aid or increase our contributions to development institutions such as the Global Fund for TB, HIV and Malaria, or Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. What happens if we leave current aid levels as is? So, you know, the budget's tight. Sorry, we can't seem to afford it right now. Why should I, when I already have a huge budget issue? So this is your answer, which again, we've been hearing time and time again. And I think having that answer for you, and of course you can shorten this, like elaborate it however you feel most comfortable, but it just gives you a baseline in terms of how to navigate through those tough questions. And then we have, has the latest investment of $1.4 billion from the Canadian government increased Canada's aid budget? So this is off of the Thrive agenda, which was also mentioned at Women Deliver, which I'm sure many of you have heard through our emails and Google groups. But this kind of helps you explain how that number now affects the aid budget. If it does, if it doesn't, the answer is right here for you. But of course, if you guys have any questions at all, any comments, any feedback, please feel free to email us. We love to hear from you. Of course, I'm always here if you guys have a meeting and you've never met with your candidate, or you're not used to working with different political parties. I'm always available to talk things through, to work it out, and we can certainly get to an answer you feel comfortable with. And until you feel confident, we will not send you out there, so don't worry about it. I did want to mention as well, just if we can go all the way up to the top, that this toolkit is also available in French. It's in the corner. I don't know if you can see it, but it does say, yeah, there we go. So it is available in French, of course, and you know, we want to make sure that you guys feel equipped no matter what part of the country you're in or who you're meeting with, but everything is there. If you have any questions, please let me know in the chat box. I think, Melissa, you can navigate through who has questions, but yeah, we're really excited. I think this is going to be a great time for all of us to get together. And of course, I would love to hear what's going on, and I'll be listening to those MP report backs, and I will be sharing my own thoughts on things, and really looking forward to going through this with you guys. It's going to be a really good, exciting couple months, and election day is just around the corner.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Neha. I'm afraid that we may have run out of time for questions, but I've monitored the chat box and it's all positive feedback. So I think what we can say is, perhaps if you have any questions and we sadly don't have a chance to get to your question tonight, just email us and we will be more than happy to address any questions or comments that you have. We do, as Neha said, we want this toolkit to be useful to you. So let us know, and then we'll be more than happy to help you, support you, and we look forward to seeing everything that you come up with in the upcoming weeks and months right up until the election. Thank you, Neha, so much.
Thank you, Neha, and thanks to the entire team, because really this has been a collective effort, but Neha really leading the charge. I hope everybody is as thrilled with the final product as I am, and that most importantly that we use it and that we share it. I should say that one of the strategies is to share it with colleagues at CCIC and others who are doing election work, because we're kind of first past the post. So we're going to be farming Neha out to a lot of webinars for other organizations, I hope, so we can kind of spread the word. But if you have connections to local groups and you feel like it would be an opportunity to kind of run through this, or for us to provide that support, please, by all means, that is part of amplifying the message as well. Not only doing the actions within the toolkit, but let's help us spread the word. Fair? Okay. Now, thank you for that. Brilliant. I echo everybody's comments in the chat box about how wonderful it is. And so now we're going to move to our annual general meeting. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Randy Rudolph, our chair.